So we'll spend next half an hour, 45 minutes or so in good company. My brahmachari friend Hasyagramy Prabhu, one of Brahma's manager. I was going to say sadhu in the making, but he's already a sadhu.
So before we begin, we'll chant a song, helping invoke the memory of Lord Krishna. So this song briefly describes some of his pastimes in his village of Vrindavan. For those of you who know the words, can chant along. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jana Vallabha Girivaratari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaratari Yashoda Nandana Vajjana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Vajjana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Prabhupada ki jai, Lord Shri Krishna ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. So today we'll be reading from the 5th canto of Bhagavatam. We'll be reading from the teachings of Lord Rishabhdev. Now Lord Rishabhdev is maybe one of the lesser known incarnations of Krishna. So Lord Rishabhdev, he comes as a great king and a mystic yogi. So in this particular context, Lord Rishabhdev is instructing his sons. His sons are about to take over the kingdom. It was the practice in the ancient Vedic system that the king, he would rule for some time while in his youth. Then when the king started to get a little older, he would retire and the sons would take over the kingdom. And the king thereafter would take to a more, he'd devote his life more thoroughly to spiritual activities. Now these great kings, especially Rishabhdev, their whole life was devoted to the service of Krishna. They were living in harmony with the Vedic teachings as well, even as a king. But to set the example and also to fully engage in spiritual practices such as hearing, chanting, remembering, serving the deity, to engage themselves more deeply in those practices, they would give up their kingdom and have the sons take over. So before Rishabhdev, as Rishabhdev is leaving the kingdom, Rishabhdev is instructing his sons. So these instructions, as described in Bhagavatam, they were not only meant for his sons, but were meant for the common people and people in the future as well. And these instructions are also meant for us. Actually, Rishabhdev, as the incarnation of Krishna, his sons were very pious already. His sons were already devoted, especially his oldest son, Maharaj Bharat. But he still gave this discourse in order to instruct the people in general. So this is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th canto, chapter 5, where Lord Rishabhdev is teaching to his sons. The Sanskrit's rather long, so I'll just read the English translation here. O my sons, you should accept a highly elevated Paramahamsa, a spiritually advanced spiritual master. In this way, you should place your faith and love in me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You should detest sense gratification and tolerate the duality of pleasure and pain, which are like the seasonal changes of summer and winter. Try to realize the miserable condition of living entities, who are miserable even in the higher planetary systems. Philosophically inquire about the truth. Then undergo all kinds of austerities and penances for the sake of devotional service. Give up the endeavor for sense enjoyment and engage in the service of the Lord. Listen to discussions about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and always associate with the devotees. Chant about and glorify the Supreme Lord and look upon everyone equally on the spiritual platform. Give up enmity and subdue anger and lamentation. Abandon identifying the self with the body and the home, and practice reading the revealed scriptures. Live in a secluded place and practice the process by which you can completely control your life air, mind, and senses. Have full faith in the revealed scriptures, the Vedic literature, and always observe celibacy. Perform your prescribed duties and avoid unnecessary talks. Always think in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Acquire knowledge from the right source. Thus practicing Bhakti Yoga, you will patiently and enthusiastically be elevated in knowledge, and will be able to give up the false ego. So I'll read a paragraph from this purport here. In these 4 verses, Rishabhdev tells his sons how they can be freed from the false identification arising from the false ego and material conditional life. One gradually becomes liberated by practicing as mentioned above. All these prescribed methods enable one to give up the material body, lingam, and be situated in his original spiritual body. First of all, one has to accept a bona fide spiritual master. This is advocated by Srila Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Shri Guru Padashraya. To be freed from the material entanglement of the material world, one has to approach a spiritual master. Dagvigyanartam Sagurum Eva Vichet. By questioning the spiritual master and by serving him, one can advance in spiritual life. When one engages in devotional service, naturally the attraction for personal comfort, for eating, sleeping, and dressing is reduced. By associating with the devotee, a spiritual standard is maintained. The word Madheva Sangha is very important. There are many so-called religions devoted to the worship of various demigods, but here good association means association with one who simply accepts Krishna as his worshipful deity. So I'll say a little prayer to my spiritual master, hoping I could say something that's pleasing to him and pleasing to Krishna. Om Jnana Nandasya Niranjana Shalakaya Chakshu Nitamyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So the translation of this prayer is, I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master is opening my eyes to the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance to him and all spiritual masters in the disciplic succession. So here Rishabhdev is giving quite a few instructions to his sons. And he's giving all these instructions, and at least myself, I just read it, and I still can't, I can't remember everything he said. So, now we have these books here that can help us to help us remember and follow these instructions. But the point being is that there is a prescribed process for this Bhakti Yoga. There is a set of do's and do nots, and these are what can help us on the path of advancement. But the first point that Srila Prabhupada makes in the purport, and one of the first things that Rishabhdev mentions, is that, actually the first thing that Rishabhdev mentions, is that one has to accept a spiritual master. So this spiritual master, this is our guide in Krishna consciousness. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, one of our most important books in our tradition, it's stated that the Guru is a direct representative of the Supreme Personality of God, a direct representative of Krishna, and should be treated as such. So the Guru, he is our via medium to Krishna. So the Guru, he gives us instructions by which we can go home back to Godhead. So in this particular passage by Rishabdev, so many different instructions are given, like about hearing about the Supreme Lord, chanting about the Supreme Lord, becoming detached from sense gratification, all these things. But we have to actually know how to practically apply that in our lives. And we can hear these things, but what do we do afterwards? So this is where the spiritual master comes in. He gives us the practical application of these teachings. So for Srila Prabhupada, he has given us a rather simple formula for the basic program. He tells us for those who are initiated to chant 16 rounds daily, to follow the regulative principles of no meat eating, no intoxication, no illicit sex, and no gambling. He gives us these principles to help us advance. And he also gives us a structure in which to come and serve Krishna. Basically, everything we do here at the temple has been done before by Srila Prabhupada, more or less. Srila Prabhupada may have not had items to study for lecture or things of this nature, but the basic principle is there. Srila Prabhupada had outlined this program of deity worship, so we could all be inspired to see nice Krishna. He gives us this harekrishna Maha Mantra, which we're all so fond of chanting. This is the Guru's mercy, how to actually practice Krishna consciousness. So one could read these books, but without the guidance of the Guru, one will not actually practically know how to practice. Now, the Guru is also important in another way, is that he's our constant, the Guru can function as our constant guide. So there's different kinds of Gurus. Specifically here in this verse, it's talking about it's what we normally think of as what we call in ISKCON a Diksha Guru, or someone who gives initiation, someone who formally connects you to the disciplic succession of spiritual masters. So that's one kind of Guru. But there's also what's called a Shiksha Guru, an instructing Guru, someone who is with you constantly, not necessarily like right next to you always, but someone who is a friend, a mentor, a mentor. So this is very important because we need someone who can be checking on us, who can be checking on us in our spiritual life. The spiritual life is said to be like a razor's edge. So one can be practicing very carefully spiritual life, but due to a little deviation on the path, one can get quite sidetracked. It's actually a story later in this canto about Rishabdev's son, Maharaj Bharat. So Bharat Maharaj, he became a very advanced devotee. He was almost on the level of love of God, he was almost at the goal. But he actually became very much attracted to a baby deer. It's like just like people are, they're attached to their dogs, things like this. But so he was very much attached to this deer, and he was so attached to it that he spent all his time taking care of it and not practicing his spiritual life. So much to the point that he was thinking of the deer so much that at the time of death, he actually became a deer in his next life. But this was a person who was quite elevated in spiritual knowledge. Part of the reason why this happened was because he didn't have, at the time, he was alone. He was alone practicing spiritual life. He didn't have anybody to check on him, see how he was doing. So he got quite sidetracked. So similarly, spiritual life can be very tricky, especially when one is living out in the world. We all have so many duties to perform to our family, to our community, our job, and some of these things, a lot of them, they have to be done. But the spiritual master is there to guide us in how much we should or should not be engaging in these things. Everyone has to work, but as a devotee, we should understand, okay, becoming a workaholic, putting 20 hours a day into your job, leaving no time to come to temple or hear about Krishna, it's not healthy for us spiritually. But it's irresponsible to just not work at all, you know. It's, just hope the bills get paid somehow. That's quite irresponsible as well. So the spiritual master, and our mentor, our Shiksha gurus, they are there to guide us in our everyday lives. So it's very important that one has people like these that they can look up to. So some of us here may have been initiated, but this is important. But it is also really important to have someone locally as well. My spiritual master, he has a system set up where that each devotee is under the care of a senior devotee. Similarly, I forget his name. His Holiness Radha Swami. He has a whole mentor program where each devotee is under the guidance of another devotee. And similarly, I see so many devotees here and so many members of our nice community here. They're helping each other out in their devotional service. This is so important to actually have this kind of a strength. I was explaining this the other day in class I gave last night, that it's very beneficial for us to be associated with people that might be more advanced than us in Krishna consciousness, and also might be less advanced. Because if someone is more advanced than us, we can learn from them, take guidance from them. And if someone might be less advanced, we can serve as an example for those people. And also, if we're an example for these people, we want to be a good example, right? We want to be a good example. We don't want to be a bad example. So these things will encourage us in Krishna consciousness. Now, the instructions of the spiritual master are a kind of a lifeline, a guide in our Krishna consciousness. So the mind tends to be everywhere. It tends to go here, there, here. We can't really understand the speed of the mind. You're not going to be sitting here and all of a sudden our mind's in India. You know, it's a 30-hour flight to India, something like that. And it's quite a journey. My mind's already there now, though. But so the mind is very fickle. But if one is fixed in the instructions of his spiritual master, no matter what the mind tells you, then you'll stay with that. It's just like it's like a parent and a child who's throwing a temper tantrum. You know, so the parent, he has some goal in mind. He needs to go here or there, or he's going to the store to buy this. And the kid's throwing a temper tantrum. Oh, I want this, I want that. And the parent's like, oh no, this is what we're doing. So similarly, the mind can be like that. It can come up with all sorts of funny, concocted desires that seem very important. But one should be fixed in the teachings of his spiritual master, and this way control the mind. Now this idea of mind control it's even practiced by the liberated souls. It's explained actually in the section of Bhagavatam. The analogy is given of like a caged animal. So, I'm sure many of you have been to SanDiego Zoo. It's quite popular around here. So there's all these animals. They've been in captivity for some time, and they may appear to be tamed, but no one is going into the tiger's den to pet them. So the idea is the mind is like a caged animal. The mind, even though it may be controlled in some sort of devotional practice, one might be practicing for some time, it is like a caged animal. And one should not think that because the animal's in a cage and has been there for some time, that the animal is tame. So the mind, actually, although it might be like curtailed by this and that, the mind can be, something can agitate it, and then it can just really turn on us. And if we aren't fixing the instructions of our spiritual master, then we can go off the handle. So this practicing Krishna consciousness, all this controlling of the mind, there has to be strong motivation. There has to be strong motivation. Otherwise Krishna consciousness can be very dry. There's so many do-nots in Krishna consciousness. Don't do this, don't do that, come here, do this. But one has to actually develop a attachment. One has to develop excitement for Krishna consciousness. One has to develop enthusiasm. And this comes from the devotees themselves, actually. when we want to please the devotees, we become enthused in Krishna consciousness. This is also why it's very important to have a guru, is that when one has someone senior to them, when one has someone who they want to please, naturally they'll be more fixed in their Krishna consciousness. You know, just like when I was growing up, I was all right in school. I knew my parents wanted me to get good grades. So that was my motivating factor in studying. It wasn't that I really cared for myself, but I understood that this was what pleased my parents. So similarly, because of our past conditioning, we may be somewhat comfortable here in this world. It's not so bad, right? SanDiego, nice weather. We got maybe well situated. Most of us aren't out in the streets. So well situated, not so bad. But the spiritual master, he's telling us, no, it's not great here, and it's actually what's pleasing to the spiritual master. What's pleasing is that we try to get out of this world. We try to go back to Godhead. And if I understand that that's the only way to please him, then I'm motivated because I actually want to please that person. It's like we have so many friends here. We act to please them. So similarly, acting to please the spiritual master means to serve Krishna. Means to develop our own Krishna consciousness. So in this regard, as mentioned later in the purport, is that one should be tolerant of any pains and pleasures that come and go on the way to this goal. So spiritual life, as described by many devotees, is sometimes like a roller coaster. Sometimes we're very Krishna conscious, sometimes maybe a little less Krishna consciousness. But one should not let any past mistakes stop one from continuing the process of Krishna consciousness. It's described in Krishna consciousness that sometimes in the scriptures there's different recommendations for making up for some kind of sinful activity. And it's kind of like, on a basic level, if you offend somebody, you apologize to them. That's still there. But that's just an example. But in Krishna consciousness, if we make a mistake, if we make a mistake, apology is there. But the way to make up for it is simply by continuing this process of Krishna consciousness. And you can see from examples of so many devotees' lives that they may fall away for some time. They may stop the process of devotional service altogether. But the devotees welcome them back. They're very much happy to see someone continuing to practice this devotional service. This is the most important thing in this world, developing our attachment for Krishna. So any pains and pleasures that we may experience on the way to the goal, they're simply transitory, and we shouldn't let them deviate us on the path of actually making advancement in Krishna consciousness. And this, as one makes advancement in Krishna consciousness, one actually becomes satisfied. One actually becomes satisfied in his position in the world, understanding that he's under the shelter of Krishna. It's very comforting to understand that Krishna, he's within the heart, and he's actually directing us to make further advancement in devotional service, so we have that motivation. So Krishna, he's described as fulfilling the desires of all living entities. So I was just reading recently that Krishna, he's fulfilling the desires of everyone, like whether it might be people not interested in Krishna consciousness at all. So what to speak of someone who's actually interested in learning about him? So we have the best help available. We have Krishna, we have the spiritual master. So we should be very much, we should do our part and try to act as much as we can on that path. So I'm going to read a little more of the purport here. This is a nice section by Madhvacharya pointing out. So as Madhvacharya points out, the sum and substance of these 4 shlokas is that one should refrain from acting out of desire for sense gratification, and should instead always engage in the Lord's loving service. In other words, Bhakti Yoga is the knowledge path of liberation. Srimad Madhvacharya quotes from the adhyatma. It says, one should perform activities only for the benefit of the soul. Any other activity should be given up. When a person is situated in this way, he is said to be desireless. Actually, a living entity cannot be totally desireless, but when he desires the benefit of the soul and nothing else, he is said to be desireless. So the idea is the spiritual master, he teaches us how to perform activities that are beneficial for the soul. So we've all grown up, at least myself, we've all grown up learning how to please the body. Maybe we think we've gotten good at it. But the idea is now we should learn about how to actually please the soul. This is what achieves lasting happiness. The problem is any happiness we may achieve in this material world is transitory. It's just here, and then it's gone. Actually, in the material world, time is quite an interesting thing, because there's really no such thing as now. Time is now, it's just gone in a second. So our enjoyment is like that. Like I just took a little lunch earlier, and it was nice, but now the experience is gone, the pleasure is gone. And it's like in some ways it's like it never happened, really. In some ways it's like it's never happened. So we need to actually develop this understanding that these pains and pleasures in the material world, they're very much transitory, and we need to be looking for a constant state of happiness, a constant state of satisfaction. This is what the Guru is leading us to. As stated in this verse, that the Rishabhdev is advising his sons to try to realize the miserable condition of living entities. So this may be difficult in a place like SanDiego, where one should examine in his own life that one is not always perfectly happy. Myself, one is not always perfectly happy in this world, and one should realize that everyone is in a similar boat. Everyone is in a similar boat. Everyone has their problems. I'm sure if I brought anybody up here, they could speak for an hour on their own problems that they're having in their life. But here we're speaking about Krishna. Krishna has no problems. And similarly, if we become attached to Krishna, we won't have any problems. We won't have any problems. In the spiritual world, no one's worried about paying their bills, or is it going to be too hot today? Am I going to get sick? All these things of this nature. There's always, in the material world, we're always in anxiety. But in the spiritual world, it's not like that. So the Guru, he's trying to lead us to this place, this Vaikuntha, this place without anxiety. So, at least myself, I've noticed a lot of our anxiety comes from this thinking ourselves the controllers. The idea is, okay, if I make this decision, then I'll get pain. If I make this decision, I'll get happiness. We're always thinking that, okay, we're always in anxiety that we're going to make the right choice. But here, the spiritual master, he's giving us the process. He's giving us the process. We don't have to, there's no guesswork involved in some ways. One should not necessarily take this on blind faith that this is the process. One should try it out. As I was listening to this lecture by His Holiness Shivaram Swami, and he was making the analogy that Krishna consciousness is very much like an experiment. It's very much like an experiment, and that one cannot actually really taste Krishna consciousness. One cannot understand Krishna consciousness unless one tries it out somewhat. One cannot experience what chanting Hare Krishna is like if one does not one does not chant Hare Krishna. One cannot taste prasadam without eating prasadam. One cannot really understand what is spiritual life without trying to serve the self-realized souls, without trying to serve the spiritual master and elevated devotees. So this is our plea here, to just try it out more and more. Because as one experiences that Krishna consciousness does work, as one starts to realize that some of the teachings actually have practical effects in are practically there in the world, then one develops his faith. One thing that continues to amaze me, or really struck me when I was a new devotee, is this talk of the modes of nature given in the Bhagavad Gita, I believe it's 14th chapter. So Krishna describes that there's three different modes of material nature in this world. Kind of a general one. There's mixes, kind of like a spectrum. But he gives three general ones. He says, goodness, passion, ignorance. And goodness is kind of associated with cleanliness, peace of mind, contentment, intelligence, things like this. Passion is associated with, very much intense hankering, desire, building things, and just like very much, like very painful endeavor. And ignorance is associated with, not really doing much, staying on the couch, watching TV for 8 hours, staying up late, not really being productive. That's like mode of ignorance. So, in Bhagavad Gita, not only does it tell you that these symptoms are out there, but it describes how one cultivates these modes, how one develops these modes, what foods are associated with people who are in these modes. And it's incredibly amazing to see that once with this knowledge, one can actually see how practically people are situated in these different modes. So similarly, there's so many teachings of Bhagavad Gita that we can see practically. One can see that people like, for example, I was just in Laguna Beach, and His Holiness Giriraj Swami was there. And you can just see how peaceful someone like that is, because they're fully absorbed in Krishna. Or like, you can see Vaisheshika Guru, how much he loves to do these Krishna bhajans. These are people who are living examples of the result of Krishna consciousness. And these things are very encouraging to us. This is another reason why the spiritual master is important, because they give us the example of what is the result of Krishna consciousness. When the Hare Krishna movement first started, most of the devotees, they didn't know much about Krishna really, actually. They chanted some Hare Krishna. But they knew Prabhupada. And because of Prabhupada's example of the perfected soul, they were incredibly enthused to follow him, to try to endeavor in that process. Somebody, even when Prabhupada was around, there were so few books available. There was Bhagavad Gita and a little bit of Bhagavatam, but there was not nearly as much resources as we have now, but still devotees were very enthused. And so, if one is enthused in Krishna consciousness, one has some sort of inspiration from a person in Krishna consciousness, one doesn't necessarily need to have knowledge. Knowledge is definitely good. One should cultivate that. But this enthusiasm is so important. This enthusiasm is what's going to keep us going in Krishna consciousness. So, however we get that enthusiasm through our guru or through the books or through prasadam, we should really fan that flame, because this is what's going to keep us advancing in Krishna consciousness. If one is not excited about something, one is not going to endeavor in such a way. And we have to get excited about something. Otherwise, that's just how we live. If someone isn't excited about their life, if someone doesn't have some kind of endeavor in their life, then they usually end up being depressed. This is an unhealthy state to be unmotivated. So we can be motivated by so many things in the world. I was just hearing from His Holiness Tirtha Maharaj. He was explaining how in Krishna consciousness there's unlimited varieties of things to do, but also in the material realm there's unlimited varieties of distractions. Well, if we aren't excited about Krishna consciousness, we'll get excited by so many other things. So it's important to fix one's mind on Krishna by constantly engaging in talks of Krishna, by hearing stories of Krishna. It's very nice, before we go to bed, we can read Krishna book, we can read Bhagavatam. They're very nice stories to absorb the mind. Srila Prabhupada would describe that in the villages back in kind of past times in India, that this was the tradition, that people would gather and they would speak the pastimes of Lord Ram or hear from Mahabharata at night, and that way they would go to sleep thinking of Krishna. So this is similarly, our whole program here in this Krishna consciousness movement is to somehow or other fix the mind on Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada had started this morning program. Some of you may have been to temple. We do services every day here from 4:30 to 8:30 a.m. So this is a way for us to remember Krishna like very strongly in the morning. So similarly, whatever our situation is, we should develop regular practices for us remembering Krishna throughout the day. Whether it's simply looking at a picture of Krishna in the morning, or chanting Hare Krishna in the morning, or coming to the temple, or listening to a lecture, or whatever you can do. But regularity is very helpful in Krishna consciousness. This is something that helps to control this fickle mind. Now, this was like many devotees here who have been chanting 16 rounds for some time. They may tell you the mind has come, because in their chanting 16 rounds, the mind has come up with a lot of other ideas. But because they're fixed in this, by the order of the spiritual master, they're fixed in this practice, they've been able to conquer the mind, at least in this regard. At least in this regard. So if we develop these regular spiritual practices, then it'll be really helpful in our Krishna consciousness. Now, this is not something that is really exclusive to Krishna consciousness either. Like so many materialists, they've realized this, power of good habits, power of plans, these things like that. But if we apply these things in Krishna consciousness, then we can actually get the real fruit of our plans. These people, they may be on a good program, they may get very healthy, they may get so many college degrees, but these things, without engagement in Krishna consciousness, they have no value. They have no value really whatsoever, because at the time of death, everything will be finished. So Krishna consciousness is the only thing we can take with us at the time of death. So our consciousness is what's gonna go with us at the time of death. It's explained in the Bhagavad Gita that whatever our consciousness is at the time of death, that determines the next kind of body we're going to get after we die. So one should be careful in understanding what kind of desires do I want? What kind of next body do I want, really? So one should understand that the best kind of body we can get is a spiritual body. In a spiritual body, one does not have to suffer the material pangs anymore. And the only way we can get this spiritual body is by cultivating Krishna consciousness. And the best way to cultivate Krishna consciousness, the way authorized by our previous teachers, is through serving and accepting the instructions of the spiritual master. This is something we should really take up wholeheartedly. Something we should take up, not tomorrow, not next week, but today. Today we should try to endeavor to increase our Krishna consciousness, to increase our practice. And this way we'll actually be satisfied. Any questions or comments? Over there?
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. It's always wonderful to hear you. The question I have is that before you go to sleep at night, you think of Lord. But what happens if you should pass away in your sleep?
Frankly, I'm not sure exactly, but I'm not sure exactly what the official Shastra thing on that. But you should understand that Krishna is the supreme controller. Is that if someone is his devotee, has the desire to come back from Krishna, will arrange things in such a way that they will make progress on at the time of death. They will go to where they're supposed to go. And just like similarly, kind of on the flip side, if someone is not a devotee, like someone might, I've joked about this with some devotees, if someone is not a devotee, they can't just say, oh, Krishna, at the time of death, and all of a sudden go back to Godhead. Oh, they have a Krishna, but so many other things are going to be on their mind as well, And so, as a devotee, so many other things might be a little bit, other things might be on our mind at the time of death as well, maybe. But the prominent thing is going to be our life of service, right? We're always thinking about having to serve Krishna. How can I serve Krishna? So this is what's going to determine our next life. So we may not be, if we are not totally pure, if somehow or other we don't make it back to Godhead, then we will be placed on a path to further advance our spiritual lives. In the Bhagavad Gita, it's said that if one has practiced Krishna consciousness for some time, next life he'll be born in a family of transcendentalists, people who are a Krishna conscious family. And this way it'll be much easier for them to attain their Krishna consciousness. Another verse in Gita, it describes for the yogi different times of the year where it's advantageous for him to pass away. I think it's like times of the sun, times of the moon. I'm not sure exactly, but he mentions different times for the yogi to pass away, and it'll be beneficial for him. But for the devotee can't really worry when he's going to pass away, because the devotee is making the endeavor all the time to be Krishna conscious. So whether he passes away in his sleep or around devotees or doing service, it doesn't really matter so much to him. But also there is that we see when devotees who have been practicing for some time, Krishna arranges them to pass away in very advantageous situations. If you pay attention, you'll see oftentimes devotees will pass away on holy days. They'll pass away in the middle of a kirtan or doing service. And this is not so uncommon. Because Krishna, he's in charge. He's in charge. He will be arranging things for the devotee to properly leave this world. Any other questions or comments?
You mentioned earlier about the advanced devotee and
There was one statement where Prabhu was talking to John Lennon, and so the question was somewhat along the lines like, how can you tell someone who's going to be, how can you tell someone's like the guru or something like that? Prabhu said, you have to find the person who's most addicted to Krishna. So one can judge to some extent where someone is at by seeing how much they're endeavoring to practice Krishna consciousness, how much their talks are about Krishna. What is their interest? What do they do in their free time? What do they do in their free time? Things like this. This is one way one can tell if someone's advancing Krishna consciousness. Also, at least normally speaking, someone is a little more advanced in Krishna consciousness. They have some knowledge. They have some philosophy of Krishna consciousness. They have some idea of Krishna consciousness. They have a solid foundation. Someone who's newer to Krishna consciousness, they may, even though they may be hearing from the right source, they may have many misconceptions about Krishna consciousness. They may still have many doubts. They may not fully understand. These are some things. That have to be there. Also, there are symptoms of self-realized souls that they're very kind to they're very kind to all. They're self-satisfied. They aren't constantly endeavoring to gratify their senses, things like this. They're very regulated. So some of these things are there. And also there's the Vaishnava etiquette that is there, that generally speak just simply time in Krishna consciousness. If someone has been in Krishna consciousness for 3 years and I've been in Krishna consciousness for 2 years, by etiquette they're senior to me, even though maybe I may be somehow or other, I may have advanced more quickly in Krishna consciousness than them. The etiquette is there that I should inquire from this devotee. I should see him as my senior. Things like this. So these are, and also someone who's younger than you, they're seen as your junior. You should help them out of Krishna consciousness. Any other questions or comments? I think I saw one more hand. Yes.
So your last comment there, you're saying redemption is always available?
Yes. Krishna is, actually I was just reading Bhagavad Gita chapter 4, text 34. Krishna actually speaks a similar verse. He tells Arjuna about accepting a spiritual master. At the end of the purport, Srila Prabhupada said, a guru is by nature very kind. There's a nice story. So back in Srila Prabhupada's times, when Srila Prabhupada was still physically manifest. One of the temple presidents had called up Tamal Krishna Goswami. Tamal Krishna Goswami was Prabhupada's secretary at the time, Prabhupada's like servant. So the temple president was complaining. He's like, "Oh, this devotee, he's smoking ganja, he's smoking marijuana. You know, what do I do, Prabhupada?" And Prabhupada told him, he told Tamal Krishna, told Tamal Krishna to tell this temple president, tell this devotee that if he doesn't stop smoking ganja, then I'll withdraw my mercy. And so Tamal Krishna told the temple president to tell him that. And then Tamal Krishna was feeling a little uneasy. So he asked Prabhupada, he's like, "Are you really going to withdraw your mercy if he doesn't quit smoking ganja?" Yeah. And he's like, No, Lord Nityananda's mercy is unlimited. But he has to think like that. He has to think like that. So Krishna, his mercy is unlimited. His mercy is unlimited. Krishna, like whatever mistakes we made, Krishna's mercy is there. But we shouldn't take advantage of that. And also we should understand that the less we purposely try to make mistakes, the quicker we'll advance. So if we make mistakes, it's all right, but we should purposely try to make mistakes and think we'll be forgiven. We may be forgiven, but it's like you have a friend and you may forgive him for mistakes, but he makes so many, a little bit of the trust is going to be there a little bit less, So Krishna, he's unlimited merciful. So there's always room for redemption. Nothing. There's no bar for Krishna consciousness. It's something we practice at any time, in any state. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Guru Krishna, please.
Well, people keep asking me, how do you know all this is true?
I don't know all this is true.
How do you know what you're doing is the truth? How do you know it's real, for real? How do you know it's not something higher, something better? I keep getting asked that a lot, and I'm just wondering if anybody really is kind of thinking like that. How do you know if this is true? You find a spiritual master, you work to please him, and that pleases Krishna. So maybe just for a minute you could try to convince me that this is true.
Well, as I stated earlier, that this is something that has to be kind of taken as an experiment. Like in the beginning, when I first came to the temple, I would hear all these stories about Krishna, and this from our Krishna book or in class, and a lot of them are pretty fantastic. Like talking about how on this battlefield there are millions of warriors and they have weapons from heaven and really far out stuff. And I was like, I couldn't really quite accept it at the time, but I could, but I was still listening. I was listening with taking things with a grain of salt. But what I did do is I engaged in this process of chanting Hare Krishna. And I could see practically that as I continued to chant Hare Krishna and I did these things, my general desires in this world changed quite a bit. My perspective on the world changed quite a bit. And also other teachings of Gita, like I mentioned, the modes of nature, things like this. Also, Gita speaking about the temporary nature of the world, things like this, they were much easier for me to realize and then kind of understand and see how they're practically working in the world. So these things I could accept. And when I got more fixed in this, trust, this trust in the Hare Krishna mantra, then I began to have faith in these other things. The thing is, at a certain point, you can't prove everything. There's always a certain limit. You can ask, okay, For instance, you can know how a car works or something to like so many details, but okay, what about the subatomic level? What about this? What about that? Eventually, you come to a point where you can't quite prove it. You don't quite know. But we should not follow blindly, but we should practice the experiment in Krishna consciousness and develop our faith in Guru and our faith in Krishna. You know, we can see other people who have experienced the results in Krishna consciousness. You know, people don't there's a few karate places around here. Now, people don't learn karate from a skinny wimp. You know, they learn from somebody who's strong and fixed and disciplined. You know, so similarly, one learns spiritual life from someone who is self-controlled, who is happy, who is content, and is practicing this. So this is kind of our proof of Krishna consciousness, you might say. At least these people who are self-realized souls who are quite advanced in that path. That's our proof, you know. But you know, if you don't want to believe, that's fine. You could try to find your way of enjoyment in life. But for us, as Krishna consciousness, it makes a lot of sense to me. It makes a lot of sense to me, and I've gotten quite a lot out of it. I don't know if I quite thoroughly answered your question, but made some attempt here. Any other questions or comments? Okay. So, thank you all for coming. We'll now have a kirtan for 15 minutes or so, then we'll serve out the dinner. Hare Krishna.